Hey everybody. So how does the audio sound? I have my fan running right now, and I just want to make sure it doesn't sound like, you know, really loud. It's just hot here in the US right now. Well, in Charlotte at least. Let me know. All right. And we're gonna do this kind of the old-fashioned way. I am gonna be using my phone to do the live stream because my computer is out of commission right now. Is everything working okay? Do we have a connection right now? Okay, audio is fine. Good to hear. Looks like my Wi-Fi is acting a little funny, so just want to make sure everything's staying connected. Cool. Hey Keith, thanks for joining. All good, all good. No caption. Awesome. So how's everybody doing today? Hey Paul, thanks for joining. We'll give people a little bit, a minute to get in here, get all connected up because I'm sure the notification just went out. All dressed in chips and crunch, good you. I've been better when it relates to the Mini, but otherwise I'm in pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good. Just got my hair cut, feeling pretty fly. Renee, all is good. Welcome to the chat. All right, so this is going to be the first monthly live stream that I'm going to start running. I am going to start doing them on 2 different time zones. So this is the kind of US, EU time zone centric live stream. And then probably next weekend, I am going to end up doing another live stream for the kind of Australian time zone, New Zealand, Japan, those folks over there, so that we can all have an opportunity to chat and have a good time. The time on the Australian one, that one is still to be determined. I'm pretty sure it's going to be next weekend, but it'll probably be later in the evening, my time, but obviously I think morning for you guys over in Australia. Probably all asleep right now. Mom, thanks for joining. Dad, thanks for joining. All dressed chips and crunch. I can't wait to hear the engine purr. Yeah, you and me both. So funny enough, that is the engine. It was in the car. It's not in the car anymore. Let's see here. Peter Miller, just interested in the classic Mini after being an R56 Cooper S owner. I was an R56 owner as well. That's actually about the time that I got into classic Minis. Ended up shifting and purchasing this old 1960 Mini with a 1275 in it. The engine is not original, but the car, the whole body was original Mark 1. 88 Mini Madness. Yep, this shirt right here is a render of an HS6. And I sell these on my merch store. And if you buy one right now, you would be entered in to win a Supercharger as well, which is pretty cool stuff. So if you want to win a Supercharger, consider buying some merch off the merch store. Minisaurus says it's 7:03 in the UK right now. Yep, I was targeting right at dinner time, or at least hopefully right after dinner time, depending on when you eat. How are things over in the UK right now? Daniel Salter says, just recently discovered your channel, really enjoying it. Thank you, appreciate that. Stripping my Mini, also my first car now, so hopefully the body isn't too far gone. I think you'll probably find, Minis have a tendency to have rust, here and there in them. So I don't know what the state of your Mini was when you got it, but if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment section or ask them right here in the live chat. All Dressed says, I got my first car, an NA Mini Cooper 2009 R56. That's awesome. Classic Mini Garage asks, did you get your new DTI gauge? No, it's not here yet. Amazon generally delivers pretty late in the afternoon on Sundays, so I'm waiting for it still. I have a feeling it's probably going to get here around 6 p.m. my time, if I had to guess, and then we can test and sort out the situation with my engine, the thrusts, and the stalling issue. 88 Mini Madness says it's wet, obviously. I'm assuming in the UK. Mini Source, good, but cloudy, still in lockdown in Wales. Yeah, I heard that Wales is keeping the lockdown and the rules a lot stricter than the rest of the country, you know, for better or worse. We're still in a phased re-entry here in North Carolina, which I don't know if I agree with. We still have quite a bit of cases here in the US, but, you know, I don't make the rules. Renee says, I quote Tom's Mini Rust for fun. Yeah. So what's going on with y'all's minis? Do you have any questions that you guys need answered? Maybe you're running into a problem with your car, it's not running right. You know, what's cracking? Classic Mini Garage says, even the sheep have to social distance in Wales. Yeah, I mean, their fluff should keep them away a little bit, right? Turbo Cooper Sport, hey Steve, thanks for joining. Corey says, yeah, why won't my Mini run? Lol. Well, yeah, we've been working on that, haven't we? We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure it out. You know, I think that the fueling, I do think it's too lean. So if you just richen it up by a few turns, you might have a little bit more of a success starting that. Curious to see what happens after you do that. Peter says, I will be looking for places to find a classic Mini, Craigslist, etc. I just watch your buying guide videos. Yeah, so those buying guide videos are probably, they're almost 4 years old now. I've been thinking about doing kind of like an updated version of them, but hopefully that they were helpful and kind of helped guide you in the right direction. Classic Mini Garage says my Mini is still broken. Hey man, I see what you're doing on your Mini. It's gonna be awesome when you finish it. Mr. Jansen says, anything I can do that doesn't cost thousands to make my SPI quicker? The easiest thing to do would probably be to get a higher flowing exhaust. It's not going to be like night and day. I mean, with the SPIs, it's a little bit more work to get them going quicker. But a quick, easy way is to get more flow out your exhaust, which I don't know what the emissions laws are like where you're at, but a high flow ManaFlow system, removing the catalytic converter, things like that could open that up a good bit. '88 Mini Madness says, is it worth putting in a 5th gear? So there are some 5-speed gearboxes out there. Some are straight cut. I don't know if you can still get helical gear sets for 5-speed gears. I just don't remember. Personally, I don't think it's really that big of a benefit. You know, there is this whole like, so 4th gear in the 5-speed boxes generally is still 1-to-1. So it's the same as the 4th gear in, you know, your standard 4-speed box, which is actually what's right behind me over here. Adding the 5th gear brings down that ratio even more and makes kind of like an overdrive gear. That said, I think that you're gonna have a easier time increasing the size of your crown wheel so that you have a larger, I get this mixed up every time. Go into a lower number flat final drive gear. So like most minis come with a 3.4 or 3.1, and going to like a 3.0 or a 2.95, assuming your engine can you know, get you off of the line with a larger crown wheel, I think you're gonna see you're gonna get similar benefit with a lot less work and a lot less money. Let's see here. Renee says, question, rusted floor, should one try original part or sheet steel? I think you're gonna have an easier time getting the original press panels, whether you get a whole new tub floor that they sell. I'm not sure what the availability of those is like. Sheet steel is not going to look as good, in my opinion, and you're also going to have more time spent bending it and shaping it to fit the tub of the Mini and the curves and everything. So I think that your time and money is probably better spent on either remanufactured panels or original presses from the Heritage panel makers. Classic Mini Garage says SPI, a good solution is a higher flow cylinder head. I'm assuming is what you're referencing there. Certainly an option, definitely a more expensive option, but it would provide you a lot of benefit there. Let's see here. No, can you replace the weld strips? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a welding expert, so I will defer to maybe someone in the comments who has some tips there. Daniel says, mine's been sitting for years, so lots of rust. Worried about the heel board, and I'll strip it and then take the outer sills off before getting it sandblasted so I can see everything. Thoughts on that plan? It sounds like a good plan to me. I think the best thing you can do is get all of the kind of ancillary stuff off and get it back down to as close to bare metal as you can. Obviously, there's going to be paint, there's going to be fillers and things like that all over it. But if you have the shell completely stripped, and if you have the opportunity to put it on a rotisserie and really inspect everything, it's going to give you a huge view into what needs to be fixed, what's broken, what is rusty, all that stuff. Adam Campion, hello, welcome. All Dress says, what's one thing all Minis should look for and watch out for in time about their Mini? So I would say when you're purchasing a Mini, just take a good opportunity to really get under the car, look at all the different cracks, look at the joints, look at everything, and just take your time buying a Mini. I would say just don't rush into it. People will often cover things up, and when purchasing a Mini, it really is going to benefit you to slow down and take stock of what the Mini looks like. That way you don't get into something that has a ton of extra work. For someone who's buying or for someone who owns a Mini or has bought a Mini that's running or doesn't need really a lot of restoration, the top things I would do just immediately after getting it, check your brakes, check to make sure those are working. The things that make the car safe, start with those, and then engine, check the timing, check the fueling, the kind of basic things that are going to make the car really enjoyable to drive around. No says, is a stage 1 kit on a 998 worth it? Yes, I do think it's worth it, especially when upgrading the exhaust, upgrading, depending on what the carburetor is on it. If it's an HS4, that's probably the best, that's probably the biggest I would go on a stock 998. But yeah, I genuinely do think the stage 1 kits are great, and I think they're a great upgrade. I think that one thing a lot of people new to Minis kind of, what's the word? I think that it's important to adjust your expectations on a Mini. You buy a brand new Golf GTI and you bring it to the store and you plug it up and you can flash the ECU and get almost, over 300 horsepower. Just like that, with literally just software. And the difference with Minis is that your benefits all come from incremental gains, and it really gives you an opportunity to feel what a car is like when you start off with a really basic stock car and slowly work your way up to more and more power. There's obviously options like superchargers that immediately give you a huge boost in power, but like with a Mini, it's all about slowly adding little things that just get more and more power until it's just a really fun, quick little car. Adam Campion says, now, yes, it is, but from experience, I'd use a AAA needle with it. Yeah, I think that's a good tip. I'm not as familiar with the needle requirements for the 998, so that's, Adam's got a sweet car, and it's in a perfect color, and he just finished painting the hood on it, so it's pretty exciting. Alpha says, howdy partner. Welcome. Classic Mini Garage says, with a 998, use a Cooper free flow manifold instead of an LCB. Oh, that's a good tip. Those Cooper free flows are nice too. They're all one part or one piece, so it goes in, comes out, not like jiggling around a whole bunch of different pipes. Let's see here, trying to catch up. 88 Mini Madness says, did you ever finish the dashboard you were making? Yeah, so I tried making my own rally dash and like a whole front panel dash, and after doing that I realized I'm not very good at that, and so I ended up working with a gentleman in the UK. Catmint.biz is his website. I have an episode, Rally Dash 2.0. If you go back in my videos, that is the installation of his custom panel dash, and it is amazing. This guy does absolutely amazing work. No says, is it difficult to replace the back and front windshields? I wouldn't call it an easy job, but I also wouldn't call it hard. It's just kind of annoying. I'm looking for a tool here that you're going to need. So, in your let's take a walk outside. I'll show you guys. Okay, so you guys can see here, this is the front windshield on my car, and you have this outer rubber right here, and then you have this fillet, this little piece of filler that goes in between the two sides of this main rubber seal. Now the first step is to get the window in this seal and then pressed in, and you'll see here there is a break inside that, that filler, which I'll talk about here in a second. But once that window is in place, you have to use this little tool here. I cannot recommend this enough. They have a little bit nicer one. This is kind of the cheaper one, but there are two options, this one and the nicer tool. And you have to get this little filler into and then on the rear windscreen, I like to put it on the bottom. Hopefully that kind of gives you an idea. If you have a friend who can help you, it will make it easier. And when you're putting this filler in here, to get that in easier, use like soapy water. Helps a lot. Heading back in. Okay. So I'm sure there was a lot of chat there, so hopefully I can get caught up. Alpha Tasteless says, do you know your way around the old Alpha twin cam engines? I was thinking about supercharging my Alfetta. I don't. There is an awesome channel that I watch, Jethro Bronner. He is down in South Africa and appears to be, from my perspective, an expert at Alpha engine work, Alpha repairs, done a lot of Weber videos, things like that. I would definitely check out his channel. Super, super good information, and really nice guy too. So yeah, check him out. He's probably going to be a better source of info than I am on that one. John Clark, welcome to the chat. All dressed chips crunch. So I need to shorten your name so it's a little bit easier for me to say. I'll just call you All Dressed. Is there any other Mini Cooper channels that you recommend? So there are a ton of mini channels that I would recommend. William Murfitt, Classic Mini Workshop with Keith Miller, Classic Mini Garage, he's actually in this chat, that's Paul, Alex Toon, Total Car Reviews, Steve's Tin Motor Co., all awesome channels, Adam Campion's channel, and there are much more that I honestly cannot name them all. There's so many good ones. Mini Man Shed, evening. Cole, still smiling, I see. Well, I do my best. You know, what are you gonna do? Engines break, engines do things. Gotta deal with it, I guess. Popco Lawns says, I'm fixing up the bodywork for 5 years now. When I get to the engine, what do you recommend to look at, fix up first? Well, I don't know if you're planning on doing a full engine rebuild. If the engine's out of the car already, you know, you have an opportunity to do something like that. You could do, really it's hard to say a specific thing to just immediately check on an engine. If you have it out though, it's only a little bit, it's only gonna be a little bit more work to just go ahead and take it apart and look at it. Let me rewind that. It's a little bit more than a little work. That's probably embellishing a little bit. Let's see here. Catching up. Nose says, what is the best way to lift the mini engine? What kind of hooks and where to bolt them? So the original place to lift the engine, the way that it was done on the factory line and the way that I would recommend doing it now is via the head studs. So there are these small L brackets that use the bolt onto the actual head studs. Let me just tighten these bolts real quick and I'll flip this over and show you. How's that? Nope, gotta go the other way. Alright, so we're on the wrong side of the engine. I have to fix that. So on the front side of the engine here, you'll see this is an 11 stud head, which means it has some extra studs on the sides of the rocker cover. But you lift it with this stud right here and this stud right here, and you bolt those L brackets, specially made for this. They need to be hardened steel to handle the weight, and that's where you lift the engine from. And it gives it a nice straight up and down angle. A load leveler is going to do a nice job of, you know, fixing the load like this. Okay. See if I can get caught up. 88 Mini Madness says, are dual fuel tanks worth it? I don't know. I had the Mark I tank on my car for, you know, up until 2 months ago, and it was 5 gallons, and I never really found it to be that frustrating, or I didn't run out of fuel like all the time or anything like that. I also didn't drive the snot out of it all the time, so that probably helped a bit. Dual fuel tanks are cool. You lose a lot of boot space though. John Clark says, sorry I was tardy, what happened to your engine? So I'm going to do a full video that talks about this in a lot more detail, but the short of it is that the Haynes manual has a spec for the thrust washers. The tight end of the spec is 2 thou, and so when measuring the thrust washers on my engine, I fell into that tight spec, which is 2 thou. So matched the numbers in the Haynes, moved on, didn't think too much about it. However, when running the car and running the engine, as the engine got hot, the car would stall when when engaging the clutch, which is bad. And basically the fact that it was happening when it was hot only, and not when it was, maybe not all the time, but there was a few different factors that got into this, but what was happening is the crank was binding, and for performance engines and even bone stock engines these days, most engine builders are recommending 5 thou. So I was talking to a few of my engine builder friends, and the Car Kitchen, specifically Alex over at the Car Kitchen, gave me a lot of information about this. Talked to Paul Jeffries as well. He gave me great information on this stuff. Basically the short of it is that these thrust washers back here are too thick. Standard thrust washers, by the way, so they're not oversized. So I had to take them out, obviously. Engine came back out, and I have to wet sand them, lap them down so that they are in spec, well, more in spec, spec. I just need a bigger gap in between the crank and the thrust washers so that the engine doesn't bind when pressing the clutch in. It's very frustrating. The engine was in and running, but gotta do what you gotta do. Don't want the engine to blow up. Having trouble keeping up with the chat today. Hosro says, sorry you had to pull the engine again. How did you identify the issue resulting in pulling the engine? Hopefully you heard all that last bit. It was some diagnosing with some friends of mine, expert engine builders. Fabian says, I just removed the engine of a 1994 British Open. How do you clean the engine before starting to disassemble? Define clean the engine before disassemble. Generally you just disassemble the engine and you clean it after the parts are all separated, running it through like a parts washer at a machine shop, something like that. So generally speaking, the engine is not clean on disassembly, it's cleaned before assembly. Classic Mini Garage says, Cole, you need to mention Turbo Cooper Sport. What are you talking about? Well, oh, yeah, but Steve, yes, fair enough. Steve has been helping me. He's the one who started assisting me, but has been assisting me with basically all of my nonstop irritating questions. Really, all the other mini YouTube channels have been bothered by me about this build. Every time I have a question, I posted it and they, help me out, either tell me I'm a complete idiot in a nice way, usually, or say, here's what you need to do. Tons and tons of help from them, and those guys they're awesome. So much advice I've been given from them, so thank you. Daniel says, heading off for food. Last random comment, I was originally drawn to your channel because your Mini is in the same color as mine, but much, much better paint. It's all an illusion. I only show the good sides. My paint is not as good as you think. But the fact that you have the same color Mini, number one, awesome. Adam Campion says, what does tardy mean? Marty McFly got one from Mr. Strickland. Tardy means late. So generally in school it was something that you got in trouble for. So you'd be tardy to class and then you'd get written up or something like that, at least here in the US. '88 Mini Madness, how does the reverse light work? I just remembered mine stopped working. I have no idea where to start for seeing why. Bulb hasn't blown. So there's two places that I know of that will manage your reverse light. If you have a remote gearbox, that is the gearbox with the big aluminum housing for your shifter underneath the car, there is a small, it's about the size of the oil filler screw, the stopper there, the oil drain plug. Good Lord, I couldn't remember the words. About that size, sits on the front of the gearbox, and it has two leads going into it, and when you shift it into reverse, it actually pushes the a sensor and creates a current, and that's what gets sent to the light in the back. If you have a rod change gearbox, it's in the actual shift housing, so your shifter comes up from the top and you shift it around up here, and on the side of that unit there is a small screwed in sensor that gets tapped or engaged when you are in reverse gear. Owen Cook says, when building a Mini back up, where do you start and where do you finish? I would say that you never really finish rebuilding a Mini, but generally speaking, I will start with, let's say I'm going to do a full restoration on my Mini, and I want to repaint it, I want to get everything fixed top to bottom. What I will do is I would probably pull the subframes. I would pull the engine, pull the subframes, and then I would have a good inspection on the body. Assess whether or not I want to get it sandblasted, media blasted, something like that. Do all of the body prep work that I can. Saves a lot of money if you can do that yourself. Assuming you can do it yourself. I'm not very good at it, but I power through it. And with the body work done, that goes off to the paint shop. And then I would start focusing on the engine while that's gone. Rebuilding the engine if required, giving the subframes all a refresh, suspension, those types of things, because those can be built up totally outside of the car. All three of those can, engine, front and rear subframe. And then finally when the body gets back, then you start thinking about things like electrical, moving through the car, adding the new wiring loom if you have one, or reinstalling the old one. And then putting the subframes in, putting the engine back in, and hooking everything up. Let's see here. Mini Driven Car Club, thanks for joining. Christine says, I have a 1989 998 Mini looking to get a bit more power. Have seen rebuilt 998 blocks with 1275 heads already on it. It was built for, with a 1275 head already on it. Built for a 1981 Mini. Will it fit in mine? Thinking about clutch, etc., etc. So the Mini engines are largely interchangeable. If it was an automatic, you will have to have some modification to the subframe mounts to put a non-automatic in there. But for the most part, the engines are largely switchable throughout the different years, except for once you get into the more modern, like fuel-injected Minis. Those start to become a little bit more complex to put into older cars. That said, 1275 head on a 998 is an awesome way to get some additional power out of a 998. I did a full build on that. I actually did a 1275 swap onto a 998. There is some machine work that is required to fit that, but if you go back in my channel and search for Super 998, there will be tons, there's a whole build series that should help you out with that. But that said, should bolt up into your Mini pretty easily. Depending on the different type of transmission you have as well, there might be some modification required there, whether it's rod change or remote gearbox. Sean Norman says, hey man, looking to rebore a 998 in a rebuild I got from a barn find. What do you think? What bore increase would you go for? Personally, I would just go to 60. The 998 has a good bit of room in the cylinder walls to bore it out. The Super 998 we did plus 60 on that, and works great. There is no replacement for displacement, as they say. Adam, thanks for joining in. I'll see you later. Owen Cook says, how would you clean up a gunked up engine? If it's the outer part of the engine, if you don't want to strip it or anything, say you want to just, I don't know if the engine's out of the car, but if it's out of the car, I would say block off all of the different ports where water and things can get into the engine. And then I would do something really low that's not super aggressive, like CLR. That's calcium lime rust. It works really well to clean off things in a really non-abrasive way. And slow and steady wins the race on that one. So like a nylon brush, something like that, and slowly scrubbing it and cleaning, rinse, clean, until you have a nice looking engine. That's going to work really well. That said, if you have the engine out and you're wanting to disassemble it, I would say just disassemble it dirty and bring it to the parts shop and have them run it through the machine cleaner before you reassemble it. Velocity 800, hello. Thanks for joining, Bob. Mini Man Shed, got to put the kids to bed. Hi and bye. Thanks for joining. I'll see you later. Sean Norman says, best cams for a fast road 998 in your opinion. You're probably going to be best off with the Evo 001 cam from Mini Spares. It's a great all-around cam, and it's not very expensive. I would probably go that route. The kind of more aggressive, hotter cams can be a little bit more frustrating to get working well on a 998, in my opinion. You know, I'd focus on something that is kind of good all around. Augustine says, hi, I am from Argentina. Love the job you do on minis. Thank you. Appreciate that. I do have a quite standard 1310 with HS4 carb and want to do a build up for a 100 horsepower good car to go to track days. Any advice? I think that 100 horsepower on a 1310 is going to be, there's going to be a lot of work to get it to that point, and a lot of very, very careful planning. That said, you could get some really nice benefits from a larger carburetor. You know, not sure what cam it has in it already, but you can get something that, it depends on what kind of track day you're looking at. You know, do you want power really low in the power band, or do you want it up towards the higher RPMs? So all things to consider, but 100 is a lot of horsepower for a 1310, I will say. Excuse me. 88 Mini Madness says, what do the ratios on rockers do? What would you say is the best on a 998? I actually wouldn't go much more than a 1.5 ratio on the 998 personally, but so I've got a set of rockers here. This is one of the MED ones. They sent this to me to compare with the 1.3s that I put on my engine. So I did 1.3s because I'm doing a supercharged setup, and the higher lift tends to be a little bit too much for the supercharger, so keeping it stock would be better. But the different ratios change the amount of lift on your valve. So what happens is these rockers move up and down as your cam is going around, and 1.5s are going to open farther down than a 1.3 would. So you'd have the cam generally handles duration, and your lifters generally handle the lift, the amount of open. So you would get more air, more fuel, that kind of stuff going into the engine. Generally speaking, this is all very, very broad. Yeah. Hazra says, why did you decide on a supercharger over a turbocharger? So a supercharger suited my driving habits a lot better than a turbocharger did. That said, I really do want to build a turbo engine at some point in the future, but the supercharger has more power lower in your performance band, so you get the power sooner, less lag like you'd have on a turbo, but it does tend to taper off once you get into the higher RPMs. So The reason I did that on my car is because most of my driving is in the city. Most of my driving is, most of my driving habits really pull, I like the power to be low. I like it to be low and kind of pulling you out of a corner, pulling you into like passing around someone, something like that. So it just suited my driving style a lot better. I think that they are both awesome though. I don't think you go wrong with one over the other. Classic Mini Garage, that's a great point. I could not remember the numbers. I'm glad you shared that. So the 1310 that Classic Mini Garage built for Dave Jag 66 gained 113 horsepower and 112 foot-pounds of torque, but that also was not cheap. That's true. There's a lot of money put into getting it to that power figure. Peter Wilkes, hi Cole, for future mini performance engine builds, use Dave Vizard's book and not the Haynes manual. That's a great tip. Thank you for that. You know, I always focused on the Haynes manual for the internals and stuff, and yeah, done me wrong this time. So appreciate the tip. Alex, yo, welcome. Adrian says, hi Cole, have you noticed you haven't been using your 123 Dizzy anymore? What are your thoughts on it? I loved the 123 Dizzy. It was super cool. It was also neat that you had basically all the different curves available to you just out of the box. I got rid of it at the time because I thought I was going to be doing, I remember this now, I sold that because I wanted to move to a fuel injected setup on my Mini for the Supercharger setup that I'm running, which I did end up doing. Ironically, I ended up sticking with a mechanical distributor, so the ECU takes the coil negative signal, doesn't control the timing, just controls the fueling, the idle, and all the other stuff that's associated with fueling. So in retrospect, I would have kept it because I could have used it with this. That said, that's the only reason I sold it. I would buy one in a heartbeat again. They sell ones now with like Bluetooth, I think, so you can connect it with your phone and track all sorts of crazy stuff. I haven't tried one of those. I'd really love to though. Classic Car Cave. I think that might be Dave Jag. I did not know that you changed your name. Augustine, take a look at my 1310. Has the power I said before. It's a track car on my channel, Classic Car Cave. Dave over at Classic Car Cave is an awesome guy. He's over in Austria, has some really cool builds and stuff. Definitely check out his channel. Hernani Gomez, Cole, I have a 1985 Mini HLE. I replaced the carburetor with an HIF 38 taken from a Metro together with the exhaust manifold. Do you think I did well? So I don't know what displacement the HLEs were. Is that 998 or 1275? And do you remember the carburetor it had on it before? Sweet Lord, it is hot here. Alex Zavaro says, I'm thinking of sending my extra motor and trans over to 7 to have it built. You will not regret it. They're incredible engine builders. The folks over there are really, really smart, and they have all the stuff in-house to do the work themselves, which is really cool. You know, for like a small person like me, you know, I end up having to, here in Charlotte, I have to go find a machine shop, convince them to work on this Mini engine. I have to give them every single spec. They don't know what they're looking at, and it's super irritating, to say the least. And the nice thing is you spend the money with 7 and you send it to them, you know that they don't need to go somewhere else and find somebody to do it. They just do it, and they do it right. So that's really cool, and I can't recommend that enough. Obviously, I'm sponsored by 7 Mini Parts. That said, before I was sponsored by 7 Mini Parts, I bought all my parts from them, because in my opinion, they're the best in the US. John Clark says it's hot in the mountains today too. What's hot? what is hot in the mountains, because today the high is 92, and in this shop it is probably, I don't know, in the mid 80s right now. That's why I got the fan going. Summer is definitely arriving in North Carolina. Mid 80s in the mountains? Good Lord, dude. Why is it so hot? Classic Mini Detailing, Alex Toon. I see you changed your name as well. You guys just keep me on my feet. I can't change any names. Did you scratch the radiator when taking it out? Dude, I scratched the radiator when it went in, but not all of us spend months on radiators like you do. Classic Mini Garage has the Mini HLE is a 998. The HIF 38 will work well on that. Yep. Then I didn't know it was a 998, but I totally agree with Paul. That is a perfect carb for that setup. Alex says, my crank is too worn anyway, and no one in Hawaii can put material on and grind back down, so I figured I'd have them do everything. Yeah, I didn't know that you could actually add material back to a crank and then grind it back down. Maybe that's just my ignorance in machine work. That's pretty cool. But yeah, if you send it to Mini, or if you send it to 7, you don't even have to worry about anything. That stuff is just going to be done right. Hazra says, looking forward to seeing your video on building the tow bar for the Mini. Yeah, so I've picked that up from the storage unit. It's in my storage here at the house right now. While I'm waiting for parts for this, I might actually get that filmed. I'm going to be doing just kind of like a rundown of how the tow bar works on the Mini, how to make your own, and how to install that, so that should be pretty cool. Classic Mini Detailing, thanks Cole, bye. Thanks Alex. Josh N says, I've driven an MGB, MGA, and other classic cars. I daily drive a Mercedes W123 240D and a 1984 RX-7. How does the Mini drive? Is it scary? I wouldn't describe it as scary. It's actually really fun. I haven't driven all the cars that you've got listed there, but it's a lot more raw than most cars. Things are just louder, you hear a lot of different things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It just means that it's making noise. So I would just say that the Minis are really fun. They make you feel like you're going a lot faster than you are. Which is kind of nice. You know, you're driving 45 miles per hour down the road and it feels like you're going 50, 60, and that's pretty cool. And they handle like a cat on Velcro, so there is that. That's the awesome part too. Mini Madness, got a dash. Thanks so much for your advice, and thanks for coming to say hi. See you later, man. CAD 16 valve twin cam head if I could afford it. Yeah, that would be a really, really cool build to do next. I almost thought about doing that before the Supercharger one. I figured the Supercharger build would be less expensive. That was a little bit of naivety on my part. But hopefully we'll be able to do something like that on the channel. Rich Spec on YouTube here, he's changed his name to his channel, but I cannot remember the name of it. Maybe Paul, if you guys remember, you could add it in here. He has a 16 valve Mini engine, and it's fuel injected. I think it's supercharged too. It's slick. Definitely recommend checking out his channel. Tornado Can 99 says, hi Cole, just joined, about to purchase an 88 Cooper fully restored, 1275 carb, has a cracked windshield. Can local auto glass shops replace, or does it need special order and installer? You can install it yourself. It's not, it's time consuming. I actually went over the process at the beginning of this live stream, but the glass you'll probably have to special order depending on where you are in the world. But the gasket is simple. Just order from, you know, if you're in the US, order from 7 Mini Parts, order from Mini Spares if you're overseas. And you can do that yourself. Recommend doing it with a friend though, it helps a lot. Augustine says, thanks for the information, everyone. Best wheels to fit on a Mini, 10, 12, or 13. I prefer the 10s. Visually, I think they look a lot better, but a larger wheel is going to handle higher speeds better, so you get less revolutions for the same amount of speed. Hosro says, do you know if I go from 10s to 12s, if I'll have to modify the wing? It depends on the wheel you use. Some of them do. The wider wheels generally have to have the wings modified, but a thinner 12-inch wheel probably will be okay. It's really about just doing your research on the wheel that you're getting, because most wheels have been tried at this point on the Minis. There's companies out there making new ones, but like new versions and new kinds of wheels, but there's usually a good bit of information about older wheels that says if you do or don't have to modify. Jason says, big hello from British Columbia, Canada. I'm just embarking on my first vehicle restoration. In 1973 Clubman Estate with a 1098 from Switzerland. That's exciting. I have a long road ahead. Thank you for your vids. Thanks for saying that. Appreciate it. Classic Mini Workshop, got to shoot. Have a nice evening. Keith, thank you for joining. Have a good one. Mike Bishop, hi Cole, nipple greasing question. Sounds so inappropriate when I say it out loud. At the front there's a top arm nipple and one on the ball joint. Looks like the one on the discs at the front. Should I pump into that too? No. So the nipples that are on your calipers, I'm assuming the ones that you're referencing, that is for bleeding your brakes. You won't be able to pump anything into it, most likely. And on top of that, you wouldn't want to because you'd be pumping grease into the calipers. So the grease points at the front of the car are the top and bottom ball joints, the top arm, as you said, and then on the rear of the car, it's the radius arm, the pivot point on the radius arm, and yeah, that should cover the majority of grease points there. Got a lot of questions for me this evening, y'all. I've been enjoying this. Mike Jensen says, what's the regular tire size on 10-inch wheels? So I think the original Minis were 10 by 4.5, which is a very skinny wheel. And so you had, I think, 145, 60, 10 maybe? I don't remember those numbers off the top of my head. What I have on my car is 165, 70, 10 on 10 by 5s, I think. Josh says, I'm pretty good with a 48 IDA Weber. I know the Mini 48 IDA manifolds are uncommon, but is the 48 IDA carb too much carb for a Mini? Are they any good, bigger CC engines only? Generally speaking, with the Webers in like broadly, they are going to not benefit smaller displacement Minis that well. I would probably not put a Weber on a 998. Questionable on an 1100. A Weber is really great on 1275 and up. And depending on how you drive it, picking the correct size Weber for it is going to, have some impact there. Augustine says, where can I buy the engine mount stand so I can work on my engine? Is there any design I can copy? So most of the Mini engine stands that are out there these days, or rather just engine stands in general that have those 4 adjustable mounts that kind of spin around and stuff, you only need 2 of those points with 2 long grade 8 bolts into the oil filter housing bolt holes. That's gonna be your best mounting point in my opinion. I have a third mounting point. I add a point into the alternator bracket hole, so you have 3 points of contact into the block, and you can achieve that with the engine stands that are out there these days. That said, the bracket I have on my car, I used to sell them, but it became cost prohibitive for me to make them and sell them. It took a lot of time, so it just didn't even out, unfortunately. But you can modify a stock mount, just chop it up and drill some holes in it, and it'll work. Peter Miller says 998 versus others sounds like there are plenty of ways to get power from a 998. I am guessing in my search for a 998 would be fine. Yeah, so that's the thing. 1275s are becoming more and more difficult to find. There have been rumblings about new cast blocks of 1275s coming out. That said, I think that's still probably a few years away. So a 998 is a great engine, The build on a 998 makes it a engine that can rev really high if built properly. And so if you modify the block to have larger pistons, you can get some power there. Have a higher flow 1275 head, you're going to get power there. So, you know, there's lots of ways to pull that power out of a 998. You can even do things like supercharge and turbocharge the 998s. They're great candidates for that because the thicker cylinder walls are going to help reinforce and create a tighter, stronger block when you're boosting it. So from what I've read, I haven't boosted a 998 before, but from what I've read, you can increase the boost PSI a lot more on a 998 than you can on a 1275. Mini Performance. Rich, thank you for joining. I could not remember your channel name and it was driving me crazy. IDA works really well on big engines and sounds amazing. Just cutting a bonnet isn't great. Yeah. Peter Miller says I had a 1976 VW Scirocco and my brother and I put a larger head on it and it was a true rabbit on speed. That said, I think the horsepower wasn't much over 80. I mean, that's the thing with these minis. When I had my 1293 dynoed after building it, you know, I'm not an expert engine builder by any means, but you know, I put some work into it. 1293, higher flow head, and I ended up with just under 70 horsepower, which was awesome on a Mini. I mean, it was fun, it was quick, and it's all about that power to weight ratio. A lot of people get hung up on that horsepower number, when in reality, the power to weight is what matters most. I mean, end of the day. Mini Tom, hey man, thanks for joining. Doing all right, how are you doing? Daniel Chambers says, hi Cole, I've swapped my 998 to a built 1380. That's quite a step up. It's not on the road yet. It idles fine, not rich, not lean, but I took it out for a short run and it backfires through the carb. Will color tune to sort this out. Yeah, I mean, generally if it's backfiring, the timing might be wrong. So you might be a little bit too advanced. Yeah, I think I get this mixed up, so I have to always look this up. But I would check the timing on it to make sure that it's set properly. You know, what happens is if there's too much fuel, a backfire is when the fuel is igniting before the valves are shutting all the way. So you have combustion happening in the inlet manifold and out the carburetor. Yeah. Actually, now that I've said that out loud, if it's advanced too much, that could be causing that. Mike Bishop says, first gear occasionally won't engage for me, either will or won't, usually at junctions. Any thoughts? For synchro remote, change gearbox. It's kind of a common thing with the minis to not immediately engage first when it's been sitting still or once you've come to a stop. Even in freshly built gearboxes, I found that sometimes when you're sitting at a stop, if you pull it down into second first and then up into first, it'll glide in like butter. So I would do that, but I wouldn't be concerned if it was doing that really, unless it's crunching when it tries to get into first maybe after doing that second to first gear. If it's still crunching into first, your clutch might not be engaging. Or it could be symptomatic of something more deeply rooted in the gearbox. Hauser says, Cole, you're my #1 channel for mini info. Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's nice to hear, even though I make mistakes. I appreciate that a lot. Keep up the awesome work you were doing and ignore the haters. Have a great day. Thanks, man. Josh N, on the topic of turbo minis, is there a crank trigger wheel setup available somewhere, or is the 123 Dizzy mechanical Dizzy only the real option for spark timing? Yes, there are lots of trigger wheel setups available. MED actually makes a pulley for the minis that it's called their management pulley. It's a little pricey, but you know, their stuff is a little expensive, but it's always top quality. So you get what you pay for there, and it comes with no teeth marked out of it, and so you have your management teeth on that pulley, and you knock one out once you get the pulley installed on your car to mark top dead center or mark wherever you want to be considered top dead center. So yeah, definitely options out there though. Augustine, what do you think about the 1098 engine? Is it a good engine to invest some money on? I got a complete engine that I would like to start working on. Yeah, I absolutely would put money into a 1098. You know, they have the capacity to be bored over if you wanted to add some displacement. The 1098s are great engines. Really, all of the mini engines are awesome. Even the 850s. The 850s are just robust. They're slow. You know, don't get me wrong, but they are tough engines, and I mean, they just go. So you really can't go wrong putting money into an engine with the minis, in my opinion. My DJI says, hi Cole, loving the channel, keep up the good work, lots of knowledge, helps me out loads with working on my 998. Thanks so much, man, appreciate it. Thanks for joining in the live chat. Oh man. So for those of you who are just joining in or didn't hear this at the beginning, I am going to be doing 2 live streams a month now. One for the EU and the US time zone, and then another one for the Australian, Japanese, New Zealand time zone area. So hopefully I can get on and chat and hang out with you guys. This is obviously the US and the EU one, so right around dinner time. If you like this time slot, let me know. If you'd like me to do it a little bit earlier, I know it's about dinner time over in the EU right now, and it's lunchtime here, so yeah, just let me know. And I'm probably going to be wrapping up this live chat here in just a little while, so if you guys have any other questions you want to ask, now would be the time. Hey Victor, thanks for joining, good to see you. Tavis says, I have a 79 Mini with a Metro 1275 and I love the channel. Thanks, appreciate that. Always helps to know someone else is tinkering with one of the little guys. Do you know about these engines? Well, the Metro 1275s are pretty much just 1275 engines, so generally, yes, I do know about those engines. Cloud Crazy says, got a 1300 SPI, can I convert it to Weber Carb or ITBS? I don't know what an ITBS is, but you can convert it to a Weber. The smaller Weber is probably going to be more suited for a stock 1275, but if you convert it, there's a lot of work you need to kind of deal with the SPI block. You're going to need a new distributor, excuse me, you're going to need to, there's a fuel feed and return. You won't need the return anymore. And then just some electrical stuff. It's a process, but it is definitely doable. No says, what is the max horsepower you can get out of a 998? I actually don't know the answer to that. It really depends on, I mean, you can get, it depends on what your budget is, really. You know, if you want to just keep it stock naturally aspirated, you know, that's one thing. If you want to turbocharge it or supercharge it, the sky's your limit. Rado says, why didn't you go for the blow-through supercharger? The blower supercharger that I have on my car right now, or the root supercharger, is the kit was already just kind of built, ready to go. VMAX, so I'll get the supercharger here, I can show you. You can ignore the hoses that are flopping around it. So I went with this supercharger because the kit was already just assembled. Stuart over at VMAX builds these. They're true, they're tested, they've got the kinks worked out of them. It saved me a lot of kind of like testing time to just install this one. The inlet manifolds, I didn't have to fuss around with that. A blow-through would have been, option, but if I was going to do something like that, I might have considered just getting a turbocharger. Yeah, I mean, this was just easier bolt-on, more bolt-on than anything else. But yeah, no big reason, really. Let's set this back over here. Let's see. A Victor says, what's the difference between Weber's and HS4s? It's just a totally different carburetor build. The Weber is more of a straight pipe through, and apparently they flow really well. I haven't run a Weber before, so I don't have a lot of experience with them. SUs it's just a different way of delivering fuel to the engine, really. My DJI says, how much difference would changing it to a 1275 on my 998B? A 1275 head, okay. I think you're gonna get a nice benefit from that. You're going to see the biggest benefit if you pair that with a larger displacement block. So increasing the bore size on those blocks. With the Super 998 with the 1275 head that I ran, I went plus 60. And so I paired the higher flow head, which allowed more air to get into those larger cylinders. So the benefit it's noticeable. You have less of the situations where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't get up this hill, or it's really struggling to climb, it's struggling to do something. Those situations kind of go away. I mean, granted, it's still not a 1275, but it is considerably better. Mini Performance says ITBS is possible, but it's simpler to use a single one to mimic the carb. Yeah, I see. So those are those throttle bodies. Yeah, that like Specialist Components makes a kit, and they sell an ECU. So you'd have one single throttle body sitting on the back that feeds both of these intake ports. Paul says, hi Cole, what spark plugs do you suggest for a 1293 with a Kent camshaft? I use the NGK spark plugs, and I've been trying these ones out. So the ones I have on my car right now are the Iridium NGKs. That is a part number BP, I'll rub this off here, BPR6EIX. And they have a little bit tighter, this is not going to be really easy to see, but it has a little bit pointier spark point there. These don't get gapped either. These are the Iridium ones. You don't gap them. You can damage them if you do. I've been really happy with them. I have had no problems with them. So far so good. Cloud Crazy says, I read in one of the forums that subframes of minis still need to be reinforced. Do you know if that's the same with 90s minis? Yeah, the subframes were all largely the same in terms of reinforcement and strength and things like that. I don't believe the later single bolt subframes got that much stronger in terms of their welds. You don't need to reinforce the subframe though, if it's a stock road car. and you know, a lot of people tout that as saying that's something that you have to do. It's not. They drive just fine without a reinforced subframe. But if you have the stuff out, you know, and you have a welder and you can do it properly, then it's worth hitting those spots and reinforcing it. But broadly speaking, it's not something that you have to do. Tava says, so I've been trying to tune it up and it has an issue where it runs a little rough at low RPM, especially noticeable third and fourth, but perfect when I'm pushing it. Do you know what that could be? It's hard to say without knowing your fuel ratio, but let's see, rough at low RPM. Kind of just sounds like it's a little too lean to me. I might try just increasing the mixture just a little bit. What color are the spark plugs when you pull them out? Are they like a brownish color? Are they black? Are they white? So what I would do, Tavis, is, and I see you listed that it seems you've tried everything, replaced the plugs, mixture, timing. I would make sure that you have spark on every single spark plug. If any of the plugs look a little bit darker than the other ones, it could be that that plug is not firing every time the other ones are. So if one is like thicker or darker, and keep in mind that with these Siamese ports on the Minis, the cylinders that are in the middle, generally speaking, are richer than the cylinders that are on the outer parts of the engine. It's just kind of a trait of these A-series engines. So, you know, what I would say is that when you take the spark plugs out, make sure that the center two are largely the same color, and make sure that the outer two are largely the same color. If there's any difference between the outer ones or any difference between the inner ones, then you know that maybe one plug isn't working quite as well. Follow the ignition system. I would run a multimeter test on your coil, and follow all those electricals. Trying to think what else. You could try advancing the timing just a smidge, but it's hard to say with without knowing what the timing is already. So I would say check the ignition, check the timing again after checking the ignition. And the thing about Minis is when you make a change, drive it for a little bit and see how that change impacts it. Don't try and do a lot at once. One thing at a time. A Victor says, are the Metro Mini engines the same? Heard the cooling system is different. I don't know that the cooling system is any different. Maybe the channels are different in the block, but I'm not familiar with it enough to say one way or the other. But if the radiator's still on the side, the fan's still on the side, the cooling system's probably not that much different. Tavish, should I do the gap on the tappets maybe? I mean, it's worth checking. They shouldn't make it run that rough, but if it's only something subtle, you know, it's not something that's, it's worth checking, but I would be probably looking more at the mixture and the timing than I would at the tappets. But worth checking, won't hurt it. All right, so seems like things are slowing down a little bit, so I'm probably going to start to wrap this up. I'll answer maybe 5 or 6 more questions, and then we will call it a day for today. We've been here for a little over 74 minutes. It's been a nice little chat. Cloud Crazy says, do you know if there are any difference between the mini bodies in the EU and Japan? I don't know. I would not be surprised if there were changes in differences, because the Japanese minis, a lot of them were fuel injected SPI, MPI minis, and had things like air conditioner on them, so there might have been some body modifications, though I don't know for sure. Tavis says, not sure what cam an old Englishman built it for racing. It could be that it has a pretty hot cam in it and is more suited for higher RPM. That's a good call out, Rich. If the cam is built for higher RPM and running, they can often have a rough idle. People often call this camming, or you'll get kind of like it's like kind of a weird noise that's coming out of the exhaust. I think it sounds really cool, but that can have an impact on the idle and the initial takeoff. Josh N says, best chicken nugget sauce. Oh, that's a tough one. I think lately it's been honey mustard. I really like honey mustard. Paul Jensen says, after restoring my brake calipers, the brake piston does not fully retract into the caliper. As a result, my Mini is constantly braking. Any chance you could help me out? So the pistons, generally speaking, are not going to go very far back into the calipers. And with the pads, they should barely just be touching the caliper when the brake's not engaged. I would double check to see that there is no leak and no air in the brake calipers. Excuse me. So make sure that there is no air, so bleed the brakes again. That would be the first thing I do. After that, then I would start checking other things, like if they were two-piece calipers and they came apart and they didn't have a rubber seal in them, it could be that there is that it's not making a good seal after reconnecting them together. If the brake pistons came out and you put new ones in, the rubber seals that are around those pistons could be damaged. So they might be causing the piston to bind inside the caliper. Ernesto says, where can I find switches for Japanese Mini? I need an AC compressor button. I would check David Ainley on Facebook. That's David, and then it's Ainley, I think is how you spell his last name. He's located in Japan and procures all sorts of really cool and hard to find Japanese Mini parts. He should be able to, at least, he might know who can get you one. He might know whether they still make them, things like that. So I would check with him. And he's on Facebook. Classic Minis Japan is his group, his channel. A Victor says, I'm replacing the external sills. Saw that there are some fully closed. Is it a good thing? Don't know if I'm being very clear. If you're talking about the over sills, those are not a good thing. Basically, they went over the sills on the Mini to finish it out. I don't really understand why they existed in the first place, but most of the time, if they're fully closed or they don't have a drain, then you end up with moisture buildup inside and between the outer sill and the inner sill, and they're just pockets of rust. It's like one of the most frustrating parts of Minis that have been restored. Cloud Crazy says, suspension wise, would you recommend high-low and what spring? I have red coil springs on my Mini, but if you're going to install coil springs on your Mini, you need to make sure that you're installing all the correct safety equipment on them. So bump stops, making sure that they're seated properly. And I don't like running the coil springs on really low cars. They have a tendency to, when the wheel droops, the spring can come loose. And that's not great. So if you want to run the car low, I would stick with cones. And then a high-low setup can go with either cones or springs, and then a set of new shocks would be good too, to just kind of finish it out if you wanted to do the whole suspension. John Clark says I ordered an AC switch from Summerford Mini. Oh, I didn't know that they carried Japanese specific parts. Ed Quintero, it's good to see you in the live chat. I did not expect to see you here. There will be no other engine noises that I will be imitating today. I am sorry. All right, on that note, I'm going to wrap this up. I am very hot in here. It's getting close to the top temperature today, so it's cooking me in here. I want to say thank you to everybody who joined in, and I will see you guys on the next live stream and on the next episode where I tackle the unfortunate reason that I had to pull my engine again, much to my frustration. So, till then, enjoy those minis and motor on.